into the Senate, you have a very narrow band within which you can operate.
Absolutely, you're on.
Okay, good. So thank you very much for having me. This is, I think, my 5th or 6th Founder Institute program. My name is David Teten. You do not have to take notes. You do not even have to pay attention. If you go to my website, teten.com/recruiting, you can download an extended remix of tonight's slide deck. So feel free to follow along there. Given we have not just 3 but 4 mentors, which is probably a record, I will keep my presentation brief. I'm going to focus on how you systematically go out and find the right team for your company. I will talk more generally about recruiting, not just co-founders. And it's partly because I admit a little skepticism, and I look forward to my colleagues' views on this, about the model of recruiting a co-founder. The great majority of successful companies have co-founders, but they're usually people with a history together. If you didn't have a friend or a past colleague who wants to work with you, that's generally a black mark, right? Because that implies that the people who know you best weren't excited about your company. That said, there are examples, Dropbox probably being the most famous, of companies founded by people who didn't have a lengthy work history together. So I look forward to the views of some of my other panelists on this topic. So I'm briefly going to talk about how you source folks, how you interview them, hire them, and manage them. And I'll take further questions afterward. My background, I'm a serial entrepreneur. You can't start a talk without going back through your history. So I happen to bring my history with me. I have my mother as a special guest, Carol Teten, in the back, CEO of dancetimepublications.com, 50% of my genome. And she runs a successful internet company, which is looking for a CEO. So check it out, dancetimepublications.com. So I've been an entrepreneur for most of my career. I started Harvard Business School Angels of New York about 2 years ago. And shortly thereafter, by chance, I joined FF Venture Capital, which is one of the most active VCs in Europe. We now have north of 40 active companies. Better known ones include Quigo, which was acquired by AOL for north of 340 mil. Cornerstone On Demand, we invested in the seed round, that's now $1.6 or so billion public company, and a whole range of others. All the companies are hiring, so check out the website for job openings. Of course, you should all go build your companies, but if you decide not to, check out the website. So, first is sourcing, and I'm going to talk about a framework for analyzing your sourcing network. Although my focus is recruiting, what I'm discussing is applicable to sales, to raising capital, to all the other processes that you're going to have to go through as you build your company. Given there are a lot of people here with a math, engineering, computer science background, we have to have some math, right? For those of you who do not have a mathematical background, just ignore the bottom third of the slide. It's irrelevant, it's Greek. But for the rest of you, you can pay attention to it. So these are the 7 components of your sourcing network, and I'm going to go through each component and talk about ways that you can use technology, social media, and other tools to accelerate your recruiting process. First is character. So as you think about whom you want to source, the number one vector by which you search should be character. You want to work with high-quality people who will stay with you when the going gets tough, and it will get tough. So a useful tool for that, besides, of course, reference checks, is services like ZoomInfo, which aggregates all public information about you. SEC filings, alumni records, the newsletter from the school you went to many years ago. It's all there. And it's all synthesized together. And the Brian Janescu whom they talk about is hopefully not the same Brian who committed the axe murder and who we don't want to talk about.
Thanks, David.
No problem, no problem. So feel free to go in there and sanitize your record. We're an investor in Clout. That's a vehicle for filtering people by influence. We led the seed round. We're also an investor in Identified, which quantitatively assesses your fitness for different career positions. So these are tools I encourage you to look at as ways to make your sourcing process more efficient. A common mistake people make in recruiting is they think to themselves first, whom do I know? That's the wrong question. And the reason is, the people whom you know them primarily because you either worked with them or you socialized with them. And you socialize with people not because they're the best possible chief marketing officer, right? It's because you're at a similar point in your life, you're neighbors, you like the same football team, right? All wonderful things, not what makes for a great coworker. It is statistically far more probable that your best possible CMO or other future employee is someone you don't know. And in fact, if your company is made up of a bunch of folks who all grew up together, that implies you're homogenous. And homogenous teams are less likely to be successful than teams who have some heterogeneity to them. Next is in terms of assessing folks. So you're looking for passion. That counts for a lot in a startup above and beyond functional skills, because the functional skills are usually out of date very quickly because the needs of a startup evolve so rapidly, and usually you're looking for someone who's multi-purpose, not someone who can only do one function well. So you want someone who really cares about your company, and a good test for that is, are they willing to work for a low salary and high equity? That should always be your bias. I particularly like people who have something to prove, maybe because they didn't come from a more privileged background, they didn't go to an elite university, or they had a startup and failed. All of my failures as hires were people who came from very pedigree backgrounds. And in hindsight, what happened was I had my concerns about them, right? But I wasn't smart enough to not hire them, right? I did in fact hire them, and I fired them later. And one of the reasons I hired them, and which was a mistake, is because I said, well, they work for Morgan Stanley. Well, you know what? They got fired, right? Or they got pushed out, or they didn't get promoted. Because Morgan Stanley learned that this person wasn't a good fit for the particular function that they had. Another set of characteristics you want to look for is relevance. Who's most relevant for your needs? So you remember 10 years ago, people used to talk about cyberspace, sort of a separate space. You never hear that term now, and the reason is, today the internet is only a communications medium. You don't have a phone space and a mail space, right? It's all the same group of friends and family whom you interact with, and use phone, email, other tools to interact with those diverse people. So in the face-to-face world, senior, successful, high-powered people erect walls around themselves because if they don't, they'll get deluged by job seekers and capital seekers. They join golf clubs, they live in gated communities. Same applies online. So on LinkedIn and on other online community platforms, people form gated communities. That's where you want to go. You want to join the club that you can just barely squeeze into, because that's a place that is most likely to be target rich for your recruiting purposes. So I've listed here some of the major online community platforms. In any industry you name, there are special purpose networks for them. For example, in the wireless industry, there's a community called In Wireless, which claims they have 75% of VP level and above wireless industry execs. That's a good place to go if that's your industry. A lot of you are probably thinking, how do I recruit developers? Very common pain point in our portfolio. So there are, of course, gated communities for engineers. The most effective ones are the ones where people are actually doing work, which is the secret of GitHub and a key reason why they just raised $100 million at a, some would say, very high valuation. A lot of meetups also gate and specifically say we don't want recruiters, we don't want anyone who's not a hardcore developer. So in my last startup, when I was looking for a, yes, I know it's a cliche, technical co-founder, I went to about 5 different meetups, the machine learning meetup, the artificial intelligence meetup, the financial engineering meetup, and I said, I'm working on a really interesting startup. Can I make a brief presentation about it? Those were target rich for me, and that was what resulted in my successfully recruiting a great co-founder. You also want to look for people who want to buy what you're selling. If you're looking to recruit people and they're happy in their job, you will fail, right? Or at least you're going to have a lot of difficulty. What you want is someone who just got laid off because their startup blew up, or they really hate their boss. There's some motivation for them to join your company. So what's a sign of that? Well, one is you heard through the grapevine that their company is having problems and morale is dropping. There are a lot of seed-funded startups in New York and elsewhere which are going through this process right now. So you want to go over those like vultures chasing down a slightly wounded sheep. You want to monitor the technology news sources so you're aware of what the dynamics are, who's having those challenges, who's laying off people. And that's going to make it easier for you to find people who are likely to be responsive when you reach out to them. I've listed here some hacks, particularly for New York, for recruiting folks. Of course, there are a lot of schools for training developers, and you can find some less experienced talent, but still talent there. The niche classes, so advanced Ruby, right? That's where you're going to get, obviously, the people with experienced Ruby skills as opposed to the intro classes. I know a startup in New York that's had a lot of success in recruiting alumni of New York. So people who, for example, went to NYU, got a job somewhere in the Midwest, reach out to them and say, come on back home, we'll pay for your relocation, help you find an apartment. The competitiveness in Ohio is much less than the competitiveness in the New York market. So those folks are relatively easy to recruit. We have a company, Parsley, which has folks working for them in north of a dozen locations, and the company is less than 24 employees. So because they're willing to manage that, and they say they're more effective than a traditional company where the developers are sitting side by side, they're able to recruit people whom other folks could not in, I think, Croatia and various other locales where it's much less competitive than in New York City. In terms of psychology of developers, so a lot of developers, they really don't care, number one, about the money. They don't want to be insulted, right? but that's not the key variable. Key variable is, are they doing something that stretches them, expands their skills, something difficult? That's what folks like, and that's the secret of services like some of the various sites that have auctions and contests where developers have a chance to really show their stuff. So you should be working on a hard problem. This also applies to raising capital, by the way. If it's an easy problem, that implies 10 other people are going to crack it. A hard problem that's a challenge, and advertise that hard problem. The right developers are going to want to crack that hard problem. You should be looking for people in your social network for referrals. That's going to be very effective, most likely. And your employees, as soon as you have employees, should be a vehicle for getting additional talent. If possible, pay them a referral fee of some sort for sourcing people. One of the plus sides is that means they're talking a lot about their companies, they talk with their friends. And hopefully say nice things about you, as opposed to we're going through all these challenges, which of course you are. The nice thing about social media is this is transparent. So you can look at people's LinkedIn references, you can look at their GitHub comments. The best talent flocks with the best talent. They were mentored by the best talent, they worked on teams with the best talent. So those names are the folks that you should be spending time with and getting to know. Another attribute is strength. So there are a lot of ways to build strength with people, but one of the most powerful is actually meet them face to face. So we, for example, recently co-hosted a talk on international visa and issues for startups. Did that at our office with our portfolio company ClearPath, which is recruiting developers. And we knew we'd get a lot of non-US nationals who were in the startup community. And we had folks from a dozen countries in our office. So that was a very effective way to zoom in on a particular population that was of interest to us from a recruiting point of view. I don't like any model where I have to chase people. I like people to chase us. So by leveraging the platform Meetup, we make people come to us. So I encourage you to look for the meetups in your domain, solicit them. And if there's not a meetup that's focused in your area, then go and make one of your own. Caroline Haythornthwaite, who's a prominent academic, can you fix that stuff?
It's your phone. I think it's the phone here.
Or the iPad. There are a lot of gadgets around here.
That's it. No,
Or maybe not. So Caroline Haythornthwaite, who's a prominent academic who studies these issues, has found that the more media you use to connect with people, the higher the trusted relationship. So you meet someone face to face, shake hands, great. Send a follow-up email, good way to show alacrity and diligence, great. You IM with someone because you're working on a project together. Each of these increases perceived trust. Why is that? Because different people have different preferred communications mediums, in the same way that a native Spanish speaker is more comfortable in Spanish. And they also provide different indicators about you. It's a measure of how quick you are in your on a keyboard when you're on IM. Skype can give you visibility of what people look like. These are all different ways of assessing people. There's a study a number of years ago of online dating which found that you are more likely to have a negative experience with someone you meet face to face than online. The reverse of what you'd expect. And the reason is people overestimate their ability to assess someone's quality when they meet them face to face. They think, yeah, seems like a solid person. Online, you have more time to do diligence, do Google searches, and assess is the person an axe murderer, which Brian claims he is not. The next component of your network is information. A good recruiter is a data hound. One of my standard questions when I interview salespeople is how many contacts are in your contact database, and what technology do you use to track that? The wrong answer, which I hear a lot, is a couple hundred, and I use my phone. If you're serious about building a company, you need to have an effective CRM system to track the people in your network, and you need to not keep it on little slips of paper that you're going to lose. So I've listed here some technology tools that you will find helpful for tracking all the folks you interact with. Whether or not they're talent for your company today, they will know potential talent for your future company. Another company we're an investor in is the Resonator. This is an applicant tracking system, very popular with startups. So you do not want to have a button that says, mail your resume here, because that implies some poor person, hopefully not you, hopefully an intern, has to filter through all those resumes. You need some sort of technology that will make it easy to track the deluge, because you will get a deluge of people as soon as you write an effective job ad, which I hope you will do. Think seriously about a recruiter. Right now, most of you are not funded, so you're probably hesitant to spend the money. There are contingency recruiters out there who will do work for you effectively if appropriately trained. In general, recruiting is a funny profession where people tend to undervalue it because they always assume, oh, I'll just go network around and I'll find some people. This is a very random process. So it's true, you could network around and you'll get someone in 2 weeks and you'll think, boy, I'm glad you didn't pay a recruiter $40,000. That would have been a waste. Or you can spend 6 months looking for the right person. And we certainly have companies who've gone through that process. So you are better off statistically with someone who's a professional, has a built-in network for doing this. Obviously do your diligence that it's an effective recruiter. But that is, I think, a good investment of money. This is absolutely essential to your company, to have the right talent. So as soon as you have the money or resources to do it, think very seriously about getting some help to do that. When you get larger, think about having an internal recruiter. Last component of your network is diversity, heterogeneity. So this sounds very politically correct, but it's backed up by the academic research. More homogenous companies are less likely to be successful because they're all bringing a similar view towards the problem that they're attacking. So as you think about your recruiting, think about people who are one step away. So for example, someone has the right technical background, but they're in the wrong geography. Or someone who has the right skills, but maybe they come from a different personal background than you do. We see a lot of companies that are a bunch of 27-year-old white males who went to the same school. You know, it can work, right? But it certainly doesn't reflect the demographics of America, which is a majority-minority country by 2040, and it's going to limit your long-term growth. So you don't want to get someone who's a winemaker in France, because for most of you that's probably not a pertinent skill set, but you want to get people who have relevant skills who can fit into your company and add value. Another interesting example, I know a company whose first engineer happened to be Turkish. And the next engineer happened to be Turkish, because he recruited a friend. And eventually their entire developer team were Turks. So this is very effective because almost no one else targets the Turkish engineer market, right? They're sending out emails in the Yahoo groups, or I guess Workit, saying we're recruiting, no competition. The downside is at some point you're going to have to hire a non-Turk and they might feel uncomfortable. But there's a lot to say about this strategy. I know another company where it's all women. That's pretty unusual, right? So that makes it relatively easy to recruit women, and that's going to give them an advantage in the labor market. A little bit about interviewing. So the best book on this topic is Top Grading. You should definitely read it. I'll summarize this fairly lengthy book in one slide. What you want to do is assess people based on what they have done, not what they say they will do. This also applies in political campaigns. Go through the whole resume in detail, understand every move they made, because past performance is predictive of future results. In the interviewing process, going back to what I said earlier, that most people overrate their ability to assess talent, I place more weight on the reference checks than I do on what I see in the interview. And the reason is the reference checks actually worked with a person. They have hard data. So I'll spend a significant amount of energy calling a lot of references. I'll ask a lot of questions. Some of my favorite questions are, I may soon be managing this person in a role similar to you when you were managing this person. What should I know to get maximum leverage from this person? What do you wish you had known before you started working with this person? And that gives me a lot of intel. Sometimes I hear things that are pretty embarrassing, but that's good, right? And that's part of my job, is to probe and get the real information about what this individual is like. In the hiring process, there's a lot of material in the slide deck on our website with data on compensation. I won't go through that now. A couple of general points is pay generously, particularly with equity. Most people are not going to stay with your company for a long time, so you might think, wow, I'm giving 3% of the company, that's a lot. Well, if they leave after 2 years, that's 1.5%. So I would err on the generous side whenever possible in order to get the best people really going to be with you, who are going to be motivated. If you're successful, great, it was worth giving them 3%. Most startups fail. We want to err on the side of better people who help you be successful. They can get paid in title, in stock, in cash, and responsibility. Figure out what they care about and then give it to them. So next steps, do we want to take questions now or at the end?
You have 10 minutes for Q&A, so you can take them now or when you're complete. Your choice.
Now. No questions? Yes?
Are you yourself technical, as in when you went to the meetups and made your presentation, were you making it solely on pitch, or did you already have, did you do your own wireframes? Like, how much were you able to get done yourself to help make your case?
Personally, I call myself retired technical, meaning I haven't been actually coding for a long time. I was technical enough that I could speak their language, And that was enough to get me a meeting. Right? All meetups are looking for interesting content. So my pitch to them was, I have interesting content. I'm going to tell you about the problems that we're solving, how we're tackling it. Love to get feedback from you. And that worked. If you go in and say, I'm just going to sell you, that's not going to work. But you have to have value. I showed them the slide deck I was going to present, and that motivated people to invite me in. Yes?
Do you background check your entrepreneurs, and if so, how?
Of course. Of
How do
course.
you do?
In fact, we're one of the few VCs that actually does this, and we find all sorts of interesting stuff. So we do standard credit checks, meaning we ask you for your data and get your permission, obviously. And we've found, for example, one individual had several outstanding credit card balances that he hadn't gotten around to closing off. He admitted he was not good at personal financial management. We're, of course, doing direct calls with people who've worked with you in the past, and that is informative. Of course, what you're looking for in an entrepreneur is different than an employee. In fact, the fact that he's fired may be a plus. A lot of entrepreneurs, including me, have been fired at different points in their life. But he wanted to understand why they were, in fact, terminated.
Can you elaborate a little bit on your point you made about the selection in terms of recruiting and looking for people that have something to prove? Can you give a little bit more of an example of how that works?
So it's great to have successful people around you, but they're expensive in multiple dimensions. First of all, they're expensive because they would want to be paid a lot in equity or other metrics, and because you run into this problem of people who don't have something to prove, right? I heard a phrase, golfing on the moon, from someone who worked for an entrepreneur who had an exit and made a lot of money, and he used to go on the weekends and say, going to Hawaii to do some golfing, something most people can't afford to do. So this is a problem, right? I would not want to invest in someone who had that profile, because the concern is that he doesn't have something to prove. He's busy spending his money as opposed to making money in a new company, right? That's a red flag. Of course, there are examples, and we've invested in successful serial entrepreneurs, but we want to make sure that their psychology is correct, that they want to go do it again and build something real, as opposed to doing other things that are distracting.
How do you quantify, something to prove? What sort of qualities or sort of characteristics do you look for?
One of the things we look for is what else do you have in your life. So it's a red flag if they have a part-time job, if they are doing other things on the side, if their LinkedIn profile indicates multiple activities, because that indicates they're not fully committed. If they're not fully committed, why should we commit? Again, it depends on your stage. So I know a lot of you are probably still working your day jobs. That's fine. You may not be today seeking out VC. But there needs to be a clear path where you say, I'm going to quit my job and devote myself 100% the day we get funding, or preferably before. Macro level, the cost of starting a company has trended down to the cost of being unemployed. So as a result, we see a lot more startups, which means bad ideas have far more clones. But that also means that the degree of traction you are expected to have has gone up dramatically. So that's why it today is more likely that investors expect you to have a working website before you raise any outside capital, because it's so cheap and easy to do it. And saying that you need to support yourself carries less weight than it did 10 years ago when you had to spend significant money to build that website. They say, do it on the weekend, right? Spend 10K. Hopefully you're at a point in your life where you can invest some modest amount of money to build the website. This is all situational, right? So if you're 18 and you probably don't have much savings, then the perspective is different than if you're 30 and hopefully you've saved 10K to get your site off the ground. Yes?
Can you elaborate on what you would look for after you did a credit check, where you wouldn't hire somebody because they had something or a number of things that bothered you? Like what would be other than is credit card balance, would that be something that would deter you?
The credit card balance alone would deter us, but 3 different credit card balances which are outstanding just indicates bad financial management. Now we ended up investing in this entrepreneur, but we made sure that we had he already told us himself that he wanted to bring in a CEO. We got him a CEO. One of the things that we do at our firm that is highly unusual is we run the books for 14 of our portfolio companies. We act as an outsourced CFO. So we do that because we find this is a typical weak point of a lot of entrepreneurs. We get very few CPAs coming to us seeking to raise capital. CPAs tend to have a different profile than entrepreneurs. So they outsource it to us. We make sure books and records are in order, and that makes it much easier for them to raise later rounds from Graycroft and Clymer Perkins and other VCs who've invested in our companies, because they know that the finances add up. So there are no red lines. I guess if you spend time in jail, that's a problem. We certainly invested in people who have some things that are a little funny in their background, but we got comfortable with it. A situation which was a red flag was an individual who had some, I'm thinking about sanitizing this, he had some run-ins with various bodies in regard to flipping some houses that he had invested in. And another red flag is in this particular case, in the docs for his company, we didn't have the right to review books and records, which is a standard term in fundraising docs, that we have the right to look at their books and records. And we said we would like to be able to, at any time, look at what's on the balance sheet. And he said, nah, it's not important, I've got it under control. And we said, we're just not comfortable with that. Yes?
Last question.
What's your view on co-founders that are married?
You are married by definition, right? So the process of co-founding a company is very similar to marriage, except for the fact that it's usually a little easier to get divorced and you typically don't sleep together. So
typically.
So I can't emphasize this enough. If you have not been through the process of co-founding a company, and a good dry run is, say, be co-head of a club when you were in school, something like that, you were spending hours and hours with this person, right? Typically more than you have time to spend with your spouse, the other spouse. So that's why you need to do a lot of diligence on this individual, that you're really comfortable with this person, and together can do this successfully. To the specific case where you actually are legally married, so there are successful examples of companies that are run by married spouses. It tends to create additional friction unless the relationship is very solid, because you effectively have no outlet, right? You have no one with whom to speak. Speaking as someone who's been married 9.9 years, right? Marriage tries you, the children try you, it exposes your weak points, and same thing about entrepreneurship. So that can be difficult because you come home and your wife could say, and I've never co-founded a company with my wife, fortunately, although we co-run a household with 3 employees, who are all, child labor. Well, it's very hard to get the child labor to actually do labor, I have to say. So you come home and your spouse is going to say, gee, that meeting, you've done better. That could create a lot of tension. So that's an example of something which I would say, it's not a red flag where we would not invest, but we would want to get very comfortable that the individuals have a solid relationship, because it will be tried.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.